Yesterday, the Prime Minister failed to put the matter to rest. So today it fell to the man himself, his chief advisor Dominic Cummings, to explain why he left London to stay in Durham at the peak of the lockdown.
Sorry I'm late.
This the only apology, as he set out his version of events in the gardens of Downing Street.
I thought there was a distinct probability that I had already caught the disease. I had a few conflicting thoughts in my mind. First, I was worried that if my wife and I were both seriously ill, possibly hospitalised, there was nobody in London that we could reasonably ask to look after our child and expose themselves to COVID. I thought the best thing to do in all the circumstances was to drive to an isolated cottage on my father's farm. I thought that they could stay there for a few weeks, I could go back to work, help colleagues, and everybody, including the general public, would be safe. I did not ask the Prime Minister about this decision.
He also confirmed that he did take a trip to local beauty spot Barnard Castle to check his eyesight was good enough to drive rather than taking in the sights.
We agreed that we should go for a short drive to see if I could drive safely. We drove for roughly half an hour and ended up on the outskirts of Barnard Castle town. We walked about 10 to 15 metres from the car to the riverbank nearby. We sat there for about 15 minutes.
No offer of resignation. He doesn't think he's done anything wrong.
I believe that in all the circumstances I behaved reasonably and legally. I can understand that some people will argue that I should have stayed at my home in London throughout. I understand these views. I know the intense hardship and sacrifice that the entire country has had to go through. However, I respectfully disagree. I thought, and I think today, that the rules, including those regarding small children and extreme circumstances, allowed me to exercise my judgment about the situation I found myself in. I accept, of course, that there is room for reasonable disagreement about this. I know that millions have endured awful hardship, including personal tragedies, over the past few months, and people are suffering every day. And I know the British people hate the idea of unfairness.
And many angry and upset about his conduct. Ordinary families have put up with all kinds of restrictions and hardships. People not going to funerals, people not even going into hospital when their kids have been having cancer treatment. Why are you so different?
I don't think I'm so different, and I don't think there's one rule for me and one rule for other people. I looked at the, I knew what the guidance was. It talks about exceptional circumstances with small children.
This hasn't damaged the Prime Minister. It has undermined your policy, and it's undermined public confidence in the government. How can you even countenance at the moment staying on and not resigning?
There is understandable anger, but a lot of that anger is based on reports in the media that have not been true. And it's extremely regrettable.
But you didn't think that you ought to check with the Prime Minister, knowing how that might look? How could you not even check with your boss?
That's a very reasonable question, and I think a lot of people would say that I ought to have called the Prime Minister about it. We all had a million things on our plates. We were trying to do lots of things. I have to get on with things, and I have to make decisions. And sometimes I do the right thing, and sometimes I make mistakes.
In retrospect, you wish you'd checked with him fast.
I don't know is the honest truth about that particular thing. Maybe I should have done. And I made that judgment in a very short period of time in very extreme circumstances. And as I said, I thought at the time it was the right thing to do.
The Prime Minister standing by his man, but acknowledging not everyone feels the way he does.
I do regret the confusion and the anger and the pain that people feel. And that's why I really did want people to understand exactly what had happened. I tried yesterday to explain my version of what I'd heard from Dominic Cummings, but obviously I couldn't go into it in all the detail, and so that's why we had the statement and the very extensive questions that we did today.
Your own scientific advisors have said by backing him, you're undermining your government's key public health message at a time of crisis. Are you compromising the government's response to this pandemic because you can't cope in number 10 without Mr Cummings?
The only reason that we're able to get this disease under control is because people have obeyed the guidelines. I do not believe that anybody in number 10 has done anything to undermine our messaging.
Often seen but rarely heard. But this long bank holiday weekend, people have talked about little else. And anonymous aid has become a national conversation.
Cummings, you're full of You're full of one rule for you.
Mr. Cummings will hope he did enough today to keep his job. But people are angry. Even if he does stay, the damage for Boris Johnson is already done. His people's government has lost many of its followers. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Westminster.